Hello students, good evening. So my name is Gaurav Bansal, your teacher for Indian Economy at GS Core. Let us start our session on the Indian Economy for the Mains 2025. So many of you have written PT this year and quite hopeful about writing Mains this year. Many of you perhaps are scoring above 85 in the prelims and they really want to know how to prepare your GS within a limited time, because you now do not have too much of a time luxury. We have roughly 85 days and within those 85 days we have to prepare everything. So within that, how do you maximize output from every subject with a limited input? How is it possible that you devote 3 to 4 days to a subject and you are able to cover up most of its themes, its potential areas? Okay, so we have to first of all identify certain high frequency and marks fetching areas from every subject so that we command them first. In this exercise, let us start our session on Indian economy. So this session, as we have highlighted in the title as well, is going to be based on certain themes. Now, what are these themes? Why we are focusing so much on these themes? Okay. So how do you prepare Indian economy? Basically through themes. How do you prepare any other subject? Basically through themes. In the mains, these themes are going to be very important. So what is this theme first of all? So when you read the syllabus and when you look at the PYQ, you can identify that when you look at the PYQ, you cannot immediately trace PYQ or multiple PYQ to the syllabus directly. So it is better first of all to divide your syllabus into certain key topics, debatable topics or otherwise static topic, information based topic, which are quietly repetitive, which remain in news for various reasons or otherwise remain part of the syllabus permanently, and which are repetitive in nature, from which questions are asked regularly. Okay, so for example, let us say we talk about tax reforms. It is an evergreen permanent topic and it is a theme. In your syllabus it won't be there, but it is a theme that you have to analyze from the syllabus for yourself. So there are regular questions on reforms, because in the economy there are certain policies that government has always created over time, and over time they become in a way the landmark of our planning, in a way they become our guiding light. Now from time to time they become outdated, the global system changes, and then we have to update various things. Okay, so let me give you an example, because when you are talking without example, it is difficult to connect to it. Let's say before 1991, things were very different. The world was divided into various groups. Particularly before the division of USSR, there used to be a Western bloc, there used to be an Eastern bloc, and there used to be a third world which was neither part of Western bloc or Eastern bloc. So that is why sometimes you might wonder why we call certain countries as a third world economy or third world. So basically there were this type of framework, and in this framework trade was largely within the Western bloc, trade was largely within the Eastern bloc or within the third world. Third world was in fact trading with other two, but those blocks were largely preferring to trade within themselves. So it was easy for someone in Germany to export and import American products or Canadian products, but it was difficult for an Indian to do so. So before 1990, our policies, our approach was based on protectionism. But after 1991, after disintegration of USA, after in a way the world became unipolar after 1991, policies had to change. As a result, we saw globally things changed. WTO was created, the policies completely, let's say, you can say policies made a U-turn, or government made a U-turn on certain policies and completely changed them, and that is what we call as 1991 reforms, because they completely made a change from the previous policies. Certain reforms may make complete change or complete disembarkment, while certain other changes may not do so. Certain reforms may be little bit slow in nature, little bit sluggish in nature, okay, little bit adaptive in nature. Whereas 1991 reforms were very big reforms, and in a way they gave shock to Indian economy. Nonetheless, to cut story short, 1991 was a big change. Before 1991 things were different, after 1991 things were different. Now Interestingly, since 2015, the world is changing once again. The world remained unipolar only for roughly 25 years. And after 2015, China has become a very important competitor of the USA. As a result, now world is once again getting divided into various blocks. So as a result, our policies are also changing. So, for example, we have tariffs, the custom duty, import duty, etc. Before 1991, they used to be high. From 1991 to 2015, we were continuously reducing the custom duties. But after 2015, we have seen Brexit, we have seen the first term of Donald Trump, and now the second term of Donald Trump is essentially about tariffs. So every country in the world is right now increasing its custom duties. It is trying to localize the production, whereas before 2015, they were trying to become part of a global supply chain. So that is how over time, no policy can remain same. Over time, policies have to change. So what we started with could have been good at that time, but over time it has to change. Okay? So जिसके साथ हमने शुरुआत की, we started with certain policy set. Okay? हमने शुरू किया एक policy के साथ. After 1991, what we did? We changed the policies completely. And now after 2015, as rest of the world is changing, as protectionism is returning, we are also making a change. We are also talking about Make in India. We are also talking about the Atmanirbhar Bharat. We do not want to become dependent on other countries. We want to become part of supply chain, but with adequate safeguards. So these are certain phenomena that we have seen in the last 30-40 years. So that is how you can identify a theme. Okay? Theme will always remain relevant. The topic in and around it may get changed. The current affairs related to it, the events related to it might change. For example, labor reforms. For example, tax reforms. For example, trade reforms. So different types of reforms are highly static and analytical, but not just only reforms. For example, we talk about the agriculture policy. For example, we talk about the budgetary analysis. Every topic is like that. So these are certain themes that I am talking about. So instead of looking at syllabus, which talks about various topics, and you may not always have questions from those topics, it is better to study that syllabus in form of certain themes, which are every year recognizable and quite repetitive when you look at the questions. Today, we will analyze certain themes like that, and we will also look at the previous 2-year papers. We will also look at certain themes and other PYQ related to them, and we will also analyze certain themes for you. So let us start. First of all, what do we expect from UPSC means 2025? So if we notice the trend from the past 2-3 years, the syllabus is becoming more important in a way that UPSC is trying to stick to strictly to the syllabus. They are not asking things which are very much outside the purview of the syllabus. Okay? And another thing, UPSC is also not asking too many current questions. Questions are based on certain thing which is in news, but they are not asking about policies. So policy oriented questions are very few in the last 2-3 years. And instead they are related to certain current theme, but the question essentially is conceptual in nature. And when we will see the past 2-year paper, you will be able to identify that. So increased analytical orientation. So those questions are not very much factual, they are analytical. You are asked about certain current phenomena, but you have to go in depth and you have to link it to the theory, and then only you will be able to answer it. Just give me a second here. Yes. So increased analytical orientation. Then another thing which is noticeable is interdisciplinary overlap between GS2 and GS3, and in fact sometimes with GS1 also. Okay. So this is also something. There can be questions which are very much related to international relations but asked in Indian economy area. There are many questions which could have been asked in governance perhaps, or could have been asked in society perhaps, but they are asked in Indian economy area. Similarly, In your paper 1 also we have seen a direct question on urbanization. Similarly in paper 2 we saw a question on poverty measurement, which were essentially economics based question. So this overlapping is present throughout other papers as well. So there is some interdisciplinary overlap. For example, urbanization. Urbanization is not mentioned in Indian economy. It is part of your paper 1 society. But if they are going to ask a question about achievement of smart city mission in India, then you have to write about infrastructure because that aspect is there in economy, but you also have to talk about urbanization. You might have to talk about migration. So those are topics from your society. So such type of questions are there, okay? Because no subject you can study completely in isolation. Indian economy or economics in general is very much related to your society, and it is significantly related to governance and polity. So that interdisciplinary overlap is quite visible and is visible even more in the last few years. Instead of asking direct straight questions from the syllabus, which of course are there, let's say every year 2 questions are like that, but apart from that there are interdisciplinary questions also. Okay, purely static question, they are decreasing over time. Okay, policy based questions, for example, are not being asked anymore. Those were purely static. Okay, then applied questions are increasing. They might ask about certain policy, for example, new buffer stock policy, but instead of asking provisions, they will ask you, how far do you think the new buffer stock policy is going to be useful in addressing the hunger problem in India? So in that case, the topic is highly analytical, applied. If they ask you same question, let's say we talk about it. Let's say buffer stock policy. Same topic, they can ask in 3-4 ways. First, the buffer stock policy, if they ask the provisions of the policy. Provisions of buffer stock policy. What changes government has brought, which committee suggested what. So if such question is there, that is more of a static question, and that question is purely based on current issue. It is based on whether you read about it in the recent time or not. So that type of question can be asked. That would be a static question from this. Then buffer stock policy impact on, let's say, hunger and food security. If they ask you this, hunger, then the nature of. Meanwhile, since this is a live session, you can also ask me question. I can see your questions here. I have access to them. So feel free to ask questions. So meanwhile, as I was talking about, the first point is that there can be a static question. Provisions of any policy or which committee it is based upon or such thing. Then the hunger and the food security aspect is also there. Okay. So in that context, you have to talk about the impact of new policy on this. So that makes it much more applied. Okay. You directly do not have to talk about facts. Third, if they talk about the need to adopt the new buffer stock policy to ensure the rural distress, to ensure the reduction in rural distress and migration. Then it would become more of an interdisciplinary question. So this is what I was talking about. Same topic, they can ask in multiple ways. Okay, if they are linking it to migration, if they are linking it to the rural community, rural prosperity, it is now having interlinkages with society. Similarly, if they are asking about its impact on food security, hunger aspects, this is more about the economics, but now it is applied, and provisions are static. So when you are preparing one theme, you have to keep track of all the aspects. Okay, no single theme you can say is 100% static, it is 100% applied, it is 100% current based. No theme is like that. Okay, certain themes can have more static, certain themes can have more applied. So that of course can be there, but each theme would have certain aspect of each. It can be static, it can be applied, it can be current based, it can be interdisciplinary. So these are the point that I'm talking about. So these trends are there, but if you prepare according to the theme and you look into all the aspects, then whatever trend UPSC may ask you in the examination, whatever they, let's say, put forward as a challenge to you, you are not going to miss that. So preparing according to the theme is going to help you in much better way. Whereas when you compare chapter to chapter, you go strictly that, okay, this is chapter 1, microeconomics. I will study everything that is there in microeconomics. Then I will look into macroeconomics. Then I will look into national income. If you prepare like that, then it is not going to be very useful, because there are certain topics which are not at all relevant for mains. Certain topics you need to study for PT. Certain topics, the probability of question from them is very, very low. They are important, as in you have to learn those concepts. But I believe when you are preparing for mains after your PT, you have already learned those concepts. You are no longer at present looking forward to learn those concepts. So if you know your syllabus in general way, if you have done it in class earlier, if you have done one round of preparation, then you can skip certain chapters and you can instead focus on the theme basis. So it will help you to avoid redundancy. Certain topics are not as much fruitful for your examination, whereas certain topics are much more. Then it will build your macro conceptual clarity, because here you are going to look at all the dimensions. You will study the basics of it. You will study the current affair dimension of it. You will study its impact on the other subjects, other aspects. So any topic you study, you have to identify its social impact, political impact. You have to identify, let's say, its impact on human development, its impact on industrial development, its impact on diaspora. So these are various dimensions. Not every topic can be linked to diaspora, for example, but certain topics which can be, you should ideally be doing that. Okay, so this is the benefit of a theme-based preparation. That in the theme, we will look at certain specific topic and we will look into various dimensions. And we will do it today with examples. Now, let us analyze the past 2-year question papers. What is the nature of question? What kind of themes are there? And then we will be looking into specific themes. So, just give me a second here. Let me check if there are any questions until now. Okay. So the 2024 paper we are now looking at. The question number 1 that was asked last year is, examine the pattern and trend of public expenditure and social services in the post-reform periods in India. To what extent has this been in consonance with achieving the objectives of inclusive growth? Okay. So in this question, first of all, the important theme is budgetary classification, because they are asking about what is the nature and trend of public expenditure. For example, if earlier government was spending more on subsidies, today government is spending more on infrastructure, today government is spending more on, let's say, capital expenditure. So that change in pattern you have to analyze. This is about budgetary classification. Okay, so that is one of the theme here. Then it is also linked to the impact of the 1991 reforms. How this changed as a part of 1991 reforms. Are we clear? How this has changed as a part of the 1991 reforms. So in 1991 reforms, what we did, we reduced the taxes and we tried to broad base our tax base, and we changed the pattern of our expenditure. We reduced the wasteful expenditure. We instead try to focus our expenditure more and more on development aspects. So those changes are also because of the 1991 reforms. So here you have to do that, the budgetary classification and the impact of the 1991 reforms. In addition, you can also link it to a third theme of inclusive growth. That is also a theme here. So sometimes a question can be there related to multiple themes. So when you are going to do budgetary classification, you have to do classification of both revenue as well as expenditure. When you do revenue classification, you have to understand what are the sources from which government get money, how over time these sources have changed. For example, what is the impact of GST on it? For example, what is the impact of the 2016 demonetization on it? So there have been various events in between, how they have impacted the revenue generation of the government. That is itself a part of the budgetary classification. So सरकार किस किस तरीके से पैसा कमाती है, from which sources government is going to earn money, and how over time this has changed, how over time certain sources have become more relevant than the others. I hope this is clear. Okay. Similarly, as I told you, this is related to the impact of 1991 reforms as well. Now, question number 2. What are the causes of persistent high food inflation in India? Comment on the effectiveness of the monetary policy of RBI to control this type of inflation. Now, interestingly, UPSC has not been asking the questions related to banking. It has not been asking questions related to monetary policy for a long time, almost since 2017. But this year, last year, they asked a question on monetary policy. Okay, but instead of asking directly on monetary policy, they first asked about food inflation. And food inflation was a topic which was highlighted in economic survey continuously. Economic survey has been highlighting for the last 2-3 years that India's inflation is primarily because of food. If we remove the food prices, then from the remaining aspects, inflation is not so high. So this is something which was highlighted by economic survey already. And this is something which was discussed by RBI reports. So it was a current topic. But instead of merely asking you about discuss the trend of inflation in India and what are the reasons for inflation, they asked a question which is still applied. They asked you about something which is there. So this is the current news. But they asked the linked syllabus also. So how do we control inflation? Through monetary policy. So from that, they went on to monetary policy, that how monetary policy affects this. Okay. So the theme here is monetary policy and inflation. These are also quite repetitive themes. Next, what are the factors responsible for the successful implementation of the land reforms in some parts of the country? Elaborate. So this is purely a historical question, syllabus based question, and it is a question from our planning period, and it is directly given in the syllabus in the area of agriculture as well. So this is a question which you can directly trace in the syllabus as well. Okay, and land reform must be prepared as a theme also. So it's not that the syllabus and theme have to be mutually exclusive. Okay, ऐसा थोड़ी है कि theme कोई आकाश से टपक रही है, उसी syllabus से reinterpret कर रहे हैं हम लोग. We are trying to interpret those themes out of the syllabus only. So this question is from land reforms, and if you look at the nature of the question, it is a core syllabus topic, whereas previous one were more analytical and current based. Previous to that was analytical in nature. Okay, it was not current based. You had to talk about long term trend. This was from a current development, but still it was applied. and analytical. This is core syllabus. You do not have to talk about its impact, etc. You just have to talk about something which happened. Then explain the role of millets for ensuring health and nutritional security in India. So for last few years, millets have been in news. In the last decade, twice we have celebrated National Year of Millets, and 2022 was also celebrated as International Year of Millets. So it was very much in news. Sorry, 2023 was recognized. So it was very much in news already. And since millets were regularly being discussed, regularly were part of certain discussions, there was a question on it. So it is purely a current based question. Okay. Directly you can't find it in the syllabus. In the agriculture part of economics syllabus, you can't see something like millets, and you can't even see something like health impact, nutritional security. So this is bit of an interdisciplinary approach, and they are also relating it to science. They are also relating it bit to environment as well. So this is, I would say, a bit interdisciplinary and also related to the science aspect, because health and nutritional security requires some application of the nutrition part in the science or biology application here. Although when you are preparing for agriculture in economics, you have to apply various scientific applications to agriculture. Let's move ahead. Next question in 2024 was about 4 labor codes. Okay, and in the context of labor market reforms. So this is a current topic. This is purely current. Okay, so merits and demerits of the 4 labor codes. So 4 labor codes have been introduced one by one in Indian Parliament since 2019. So code on the wage bill, etc. There have been 4 total labor related bills, and you have to talk about what has happened in the last 4 or 5 years regarding that, and similarly you also have to talk about their merits and demerits. So of course there is some application to it, but still largely a current affairs related question. Theme is accidentally mentioned as land reform. It should be labor reform. Okay. Then what is the need for expanding the regional air connectivity in India? In this context, discuss the government UDAN scheme. So it is a topic from your syllabus. It is not in news recently as such, because UDAN is already a very old scheme. We also call it regional connectivity scheme. So it was not in news as such. And if we are talking about in news, then such many topics remain in news like that, and there's nothing as such in news about it. So it was a general question from your syllabus. So it will be core syllabus topic, because in your syllabus, in the infrastructure area, transport is major area, where you have road transport, railway transport, air transport. So this is a question from your air transport infrastructure. Okay. Then next question was, what are the major challenges faced by the Indian irrigation system in the recent time? States the measures taken by the government for efficient irrigation management. Okay, so this is a core syllabus topic, and theme is irrigation system. It is from your agriculture area, and it is directly from the syllabus. Irrigation system is part of your syllabus, and it is not based on certain current affairs or not based on certain application based question, application based topic. So directly you have to talk about the Indian irrigation challenges and the government steps. So a direct question from the syllabus. So as I was talking about, your syllabus related questions have been much more in recent time. Next question, elucidate the importance of the buffer stock for stabilizing agriculture prices in India. What are the challenges associated with the storage of buffer stock? So this is applied question, although this is also related to core syllabus. So buffer stock is part of your syllabus. In the topic of FCI, Food Corporation, buffer stocks are there. And the role of buffer stock in the agriculture price stability. So in a way, core syllabus as well as applied, both dimensions you can link to this question. So as we can see, there is only one question which is purely current affair based. Okay, there is only one question which is purely current affair based. Otherwise, we can see at least 4 questions directly from syllabus, or otherwise 2 to 3 questions which are from applied or analytical aspect. Clear? So this is what I was talking about. And why students are not able to get marks in recent time is also because they are asking more and more of syllabus oriented, core syllabus questions. And before that, for almost 5-6 years, they were asking about current based questions. So because from almost 2017-16 to almost 2021-22, they were asking continuously current affair based question, the students were preparing in that manner only. The students also changed their preparation methodology and they started to read all those current affair compilation and the PT 360, Means 360, or whatever notes are there in market, and they started to skip the core books, the core syllabus. And that is why today they are finding it difficult when direct syllabus oriented questions are asked. If you prepare from current affair notes, you are not going to answer this paper very well. Of course, you will be right about these topics because even in current affair, they do talk about what the topic is, what the issue is, but they cannot take you in depth. So your preparation cannot be purely based on current affair. Your preparation has to include current affair, but it has to cover the core component. It has to cover its applications in the other areas, interdisciplinary aspect, and it also look into current. आपको सब कुछ cover करके चलना. You have to prepare all of them. Similarly, if you look at the 2023, you will find most of the questions again syllabus oriented. Okay. How does technology help farmers in production and marketing of agriculture produce? Purely syllabus based question. There is no current affair based dimension. It is not even highly applied. Then state the objectives and measures of land reforms in India. Again, core syllabus. So, syllabus based question are more and more. There was one current affair based question, which is the status of digitization in Indian economy. So this was more about recent developments related to your, let's say, UPI, okay, and let's say other, not only payment aspects, but also your toll payment and other area where people are using technology more and more in day-to-day life. And not only that, there are many more aspects. So this was from general observations in the news. It is not, you cannot trace this question to syllabus. This is something you can answer only from current. If you are reading newspaper regularly, you can answer it. But rest of the question you cannot. Okay. First question is highly applied and analytical. Similarly, as we move ahead, you will see again more question from syllabus. Okay. Most of the unemployment in India is structural in nature. So this is purely from theory aspect. What is structural reform? What is structural unemployment? What is cyclical unemployment? First of all, you need to know about the various types of unemployment. What are their various impacts? So these type of things also we need to be clear about. So this is related to your core syllabus. Then there was this question about care economy, monetized economy. This was something you could link to current affairs. This is not your core syllabus. You can link it to the inclusive growth. You can link it to the women empowerment. But this is something which was in news for last 2-3 years. Ever since purple economy is highly in discussion. And then if you see the rest of the syllabus, the direct indirect subsidies provided to farm sector in India, this is also your core syllabus. And similarly, changes in the crop pattern is also related to your syllabus, but this were a little bit analytical because you had to link it with the market and consumption. So we have spent enough time on analyzing the previous year paper, and you can see more and more questions are now coming from syllabus. And as a result, it is very important that you are well versed with the syllabus as well. You are not basing your preparation entirely on current affairs, because that can be problematic. Now, if you look at the Indian economy syllabus, we can divide it into 8 areas. Of course, somebody can divide it into 10 areas as well, Somebody can divide it into 12 areas. Let's say if you divide in these 8 areas, you will find a very easy and clear idea. So there are certain basic concepts. Here we are not talking about Indian economy. Here we are talking about the basic concepts of economics. So your microeconomics, macroeconomics, national income. Okay. So these are certain basic things that you need to know about. Direct question from this area in mains, there can be, for example, from macroeconomics that we see here, there are certain aspects related to development, inclusive growth, from where questions are there. Inclusive growth can also be, however, linked in better way to welfare economics. Still, from macroeconomics, the topic of growth and development is relevant. On that topic, they can still ask means question, and they're asking time to time. Micro is not relevant for means at all, although you need to know about that as well. But now it is not the time to study microeconomics. उसको पढ़ना जरूरी है, but वो पहले पढ़ना चाहिए था. You should have covered it earlier. If it is not covered until now, skip it. National income. Time to time, there are questions. Not very frequently repeated topic, but still there are questions. So, national income is one area, but these are 2-3 themes only. From this topic, we do not have too many themes. So, basic concept you need to know in order to understand the subject well. Direct questions from this are very few. Then, Indian economic planning and reforms. From this area also we have question, but again, very few themes and very few questions. So, first 2 areas are in a way the basic idea that you need to have in order to start preparing the subject. These are the basic building blocks. Although there are 4 or 5 themes here in total in both of them, from where direct questions can be there. For example, in the Indian economic planning and reforms area, there are of course multiple topics. For example, land reforms. You can cover it in agriculture, you can cover it as a part of planning as well. Okay. Then green revolution was also part of your planning process. So over time, how planning has evolved in India, how until 1991 we were dominated by central planning, how now in India we have indicative planning. So changing nature of planning, that is an important theme here. And on the changing nature of planning, there can be question. For example, centralized planning versus decentralized planning. Similarly, they can ask you about the imperative planning to indicative planning. So, fiscal policy, monetary policy, how they help in economic planning and economic policies. So, these type of questions are of course here. Then reforms, 1991 reforms and the ongoing reforms are also very important area. From reforms also directly there are questions, and we will see few of them. So I've included these 2 themes for discussion today. Then there is a topic budget and public finance, in which you cover the government budget, the taxes, okay, the tax reforms, the nature of expenditure, the government schemes. So all the taxes that government collect, from which source are they coming, how they impact people, how they affect the consumption, how they affect the investment, all those topics are relevant. So from this area onwards, we have topics which are very much there in the current issues as well. So these are topics from which you see current news also, and these are much more dedicated to Indian economic performance today. Okay. So contemporary issues are more related to remaining 6 topics. And from these topics, there are so many themes. Almost 10-12 themes are there from the budget and public finance. Then similarly, about 10-12 themes you can cover from banking, finance and monetary policy as well. Similarly, from agriculture, international economics also we can cover a large number of themes. Today, we are not going to analyze all the themes. My objective for this session is not to give you a listing of the themes. The objective of today's session would rather be to discuss 7-8 themes in class and to give you overall idea that once you have identified themes, what to do with them. अगर आपने एक बार themes समझ ली, एक बार आपने अपने सिलेबस को थीम में डिवाइड कर दिया, फिर क्या करना है? So I would request you to do the first exercise yourself, and you will get to know how to divide into themes. Similarly, the remaining syllabus can be divided into banking, finance, monetary policy, from which you have RBI, banking, and stock market, capital market, all those aspects. This is also not much relevant for mains, and indirectly there was a question last year, otherwise they were not even asking such question. Last year they asked a question on monetary policy in context of inflation, and on banking, finance, RBI questions are not being asked today. Similarly, industry, services, infrastructure, every year there are 2 questions on average on these topics. And relevant topic, you can divide it into multiple themes. For example, MSME can be one of your theme, micro, small and medium enterprises. Okay, just give me a second here. Okay, so I was talking about industry, that in your industry topic, micro, small and medium enterprises is a topic. Similarly, the job creation is an important topic. Similarly, the Make in India, okay, FDI, foreign investments, all of those topics are quite relevant. New industrial policy, labor reforms. So number of topics are there within industry. Similarly, services. Similarly, in infrastructure, infrastructure financings, infrastructure impact on economic growth, infrastructure role in economic development, on social and welfare related aspects. Then there can be dedicated questions about power, energy security. There can be questions directly related to ports and their role in India's trade. So infrastructure is also a relevant topic from where we see regular questions. Agriculture, I would say, is the single most important topic from which at least 3 to 4 questions are there each year. Okay, almost every year we see 1 question to 2 questions from budget. Okay, banking, finance is not getting asked these days. Industry, services, infrastructure, again 1 to 2 question. And international economics, usually they are not asking question, but sometimes they ask 1 question, but with less frequency. Welfare economics, at least 1 question every year. Okay, so I would say this is 0 to 1. This is roughly 0. Okay, and this is 1 to 2. This is 1 to 2. This is 3 to 4. And these two together, let's say 0 to 1 or 1. So that is how they're asking. In total, 8 questions to 9 questions. 3 to 4 questions in agriculture, 1 to 2 questions in industry, infrastructure. So about 5 to 6 questions from these 2 areas, the sectors of Indian economy. And about, let's say, 1 to 2 questions, or let's say up to 2 questions from these first 3 areas: planning, reforms, budget, public finance, and basic concepts. And then 1 or 2 questions from the remaining topics. That is how we are getting question being framed right now. Now let's move ahead. So if we want to break down these syllabus areas into themes, let us look at certain examples. If we look at the basic concepts, then from the area of basic concepts, we have a theme such as inclusive growth, then pattern of economic growth, and GDP measurement. These are certain topics. There can be more topics, but I am restricting it to 3 today. Okay, I'm just giving you an idea. If we pick up a theme, how do we prepare it? So let's say these are certain examples that I'm taking. So question जब आता है ना, तो question किस पे होता है? या तो inclusive growth पे. Either they are asking question on inclusive growth related aspect, or they are asking a question on the pattern of economic growth, that in India's economic growth currently, are there enough jobs, or is India's economic growth going down? Do India have V-shaped recovery? In recent years, these type of questions we have seen on the pattern of economic growth. So India is continuously having growth. India is one of the fastest growing country in the world. In fact, at present, it is the fastest growing country in the top economies. It is the fastest growing large economy, we can say. So India की growth तो लगातार हो रही है. We are continuously growing. Okay? Meanwhile, our growth sometimes remain high, sometimes remain low. Sometimes we are able to create, let's say, more jobs. Sometimes we are not able to create jobs. In certain phases, let's say northern India performs relatively better or western India performs relatively better. In certain phases, southern India faced relatively better. So different phases excel in different time period. So that phenomena they can ask you, that in recent time economic growth has been up, economic growth has been down, or economic growth has recovered or not. So pattern of economic growth is very, very relevant, and this is something for which you have to refer to economic survey every year. जो हम सर्वे पढ़ते हैं वो इस तरह के पैटर्न्स को अंडरस्टैंड करने के लिए पढ़ते हैं. This is something where survey helps you much more. Okay? Then GDP measurement is a static topic. GDP measurement, sometimes when government changes the policy, when government brings certain changes, then you can link it to some current issue. Otherwise, this is a static topic, which they usually ask when government make changes to it. So, in basic concepts, these are certain themes. Then similarly, in Indian economic planning and reforms, we can say impact of economic reforms is also an important theme. Similarly, we will see tax reforms, we will see budget classification, we will see crop diversification and land reforms. So I have picked up about 8 topics today for analysis. These 8 topics we are going to do in detail in today's session, and in this class you will get a full idea इन सारे एरियाज में क्या क्या करना है, इससे किस किस तरह का क्वेश्चन आएगा और किस तरह का क्वेश्चन आया है. Same exercise you do for the remaining. At max, the entire economy you can divide into 75 to 80 themes. And each day, if you spend hardly half an hour on each theme, you can cover these in 2 days. And after that, you can even revise them in 1 more day. So in 3 to 4 days, you can prepare Indian economy in this thematic manner. Let's move ahead here. So I've given you which themes we are going to look into. So if we look at these themes, I told you we have picked about 8-9 topics, or 8 topics I will discuss. So out of them, one is budget classification, then impact of reforms, GDP measurement, land reforms. These are examples of certain static themes. Budget classification never changes. Budget classification remains same. What is current expenditure will always remain current expenditure. Over time, the pattern can change, that we may be spending more on the current expenditure today. Tomorrow, we may spend more on capital. So our behavior can change, but these topics always remain the same. These are static topics in which there can be application. So budget classification is an important static theme. कि सरकार का जो बजट है वो कैसे बदल रहा है, हाउ गवर्नमेंट बजट इज चेंजिंग, आर वी गेटिंग मोर मनी थ्रू डायरेक्ट टैक्सेस, क्या डायरेक्ट टैक्स से ज्यादा पैसा आता है, और आर वी गेटिंग मोर मनी थ्रू इनडायरेक्ट टैक्सेस, ओके, एंड हाउ डू दे इम्पैक्ट इकोनॉमी, if government brought a change in GST, how it affects people, okay, so that will be part of your tax reforms, for example. So likewise, the budgetary analysis when you do, in which area of budget, what change we are doing, that is part of budget classification. Then impact of reforms. Now, reforms are something which we have already created, which we have already brought. In 1991, we changed certain policies. Then over time, continuously we have changed more and more policies, and we have brought more and more changes. So, the idea is that जो हमने 1991 में किया, what we did in 1991, for example, LPNG, that is never going to change. That is more or less a static topic. There can be some application, that what is the impact of LPG on economic growth, what is the impact of LPG on India's BOP, balance of payment, what is its impact on employment. So there can be applications, but otherwise, since this is already history, this is done, this is a static topic. Okay, इसमें आपको finite पढ़ना है. You have to study something which is finite. That this is something we did in 1991. Then over time we brought FRBM Act, we brought VAT, we brought GST. So there are some major reforms that we have brought over time as well. So in total, when you study reforms, the first generation reforms are 1991. Then there are some reforms which were brought later, somewhere around 1998, 1999. Then certain reforms were brought around 2015. So likewise, over time we have seen certain phases. But whatever has been done is already done. इसमें कुछ बहुत change नहीं होगा. The reforms are done. That is in history. So it is a static theme with application. Similarly, GDP measurement. The GDP measurement methodology remains the same. Our government can change the methodology, as in earlier we could be using methodology A. Today we could be using methodology B. So हम अपना method change कर सकते हैं, but otherwise the methodology themselves do not change. The subject itself is not evolving very highly over here. This is also largely a static theme where there are application. So in the GDP measurement, are we including this? For example, the question on care economy. The question on care economy is related to GDP measurement because they are asking about something which is not included in GDP. Okay, something which is not counted. So that was an application of GDP measurement. So question था care economy पे. They asked a question on care economy. And आप लोग क्या सोचेंगे कि ये question GDP measurement से कैसे related है? Because care economy as such comes into news is a result of your weakness in the GDP measurement. So it is an application of GDP measurement. There is some weakness. GDP can only include something for which someone pay. So if I'm offering a service to someone, let's say I'm offering tax advice to third person for 5,000 rupees. That person is paying to me, hence what I'm doing is a service and that is part of GDP. That 5,000 rupee will become my income and it will become part of GDP. But I'm offering my brother free tax advice. My brother is working in software industry. He is not very good with tax. I'm offering him free tax advice. I'm doing the same effort, same service I'm providing, but since it is not counted in GDP, it is missed from the GDP data. So that is care economy because I care for my brother, because this is our social association, our family association. So these aspects are care economy. These are related to GDP because these are slippages from GDP measurement. So I'm just trying to explain कि GDP measurement एक fixed topic है, that this is GDP at factor cost, this is GDP at market price. There are fixed formula for that. So those are fixed topic with fixed formulas. But beyond that, there can be conceptual depth into these topics as well. So certain topics might look very static, but there can be a lot of depth into them. There can be a lot of conceptual background to them. So the care economy topic that I'm again repeating was related to your GDP measurement. Similarly, your land reforms, mostly a static topic because land reforms were largely carried out in the 1960s. And since then, we have seen very few land reforms, although we can identify a handful of land reforms in 21st century, but this is largely a static topic with very limited applications. So there can be certain static topic where all you need to study is what government did and how it affected Indian economy. That's all. There are very few applications. Okay, there are applications, but there are few applications. So यहाँ पे factual ज़्यादा important है. Okay, theory is more important. Facts, theory, more important. There can be applications, so we have to look at that what happened at that time. If we want to do it in today's time, how this is changing. अगर आज हमें land reforms करने हो तो आज क्या चाहिए? How these are going to be different in today's context. So there can be applications. Applications can be for any topic, by the way. Then current affair linked themes. There are certain topics which are being asked just because something has happened recently. It is not a typically syllabus related question. This is not a very historical thing which is well established. So pattern of economic growth. So pattern of economic growth is always changing, and usually the nature of question that we are being asked in general is from the recent time, that in recent years how unemployment has changed, how in recent years Indian economy has recovered, how our growth has become largely dependent on services sector, how rural areas are getting marginalized or are getting ignored in the process. So these are certain things that we need to identify. These are mostly current, recent development related topics for which economic survey is more important. Okay. Then tax reforms. We have a tax system. From time to time we make changes to it. And in the tax reform, we are talking about mostly the recent changes. For example, there can be question on GST, there can be question on the direct tax code. So these are mostly related to what we have done recently. Okay. Then there is a topic of crop diversification. How we are growing various crops, how we are changing from a wheat and rice dominated system to other systems over time. So likewise, we have various themes. Now let us look at them one by one. So this one theme I have classified already in detail here. So budget classification is your theme. If you look at this theme, budget classification, you first of all have to identify what all is there. This topic में पढ़ना क्या क्या है, what all you need to prepare. So first of all, when you look at the budget, budget is first divided between revenue and expenditure. Your budget is always first divided into revenue and expenditure. Revenue is earning of government, expenditure is spending of government. So then your revenue gets divided into current and capital. What are the sources of revenue? Okay, current or capital. Similarly, what are the areas of expenditure where we are spending money? Are these current? Are these capital? This is also something that we need to look into. Clear? So this classification first of all should be very clear. What is revenue? What are the multiple sources of revenue? What are the areas of expenditure? सरकार पैसा कहाँ खर्च करती है? Okay, then what is the concept of current account? What is the concept of capital account? That should also be very clear. Then within that, this part is largely static. So far, this is economic theory, where we are looking at what is generally the source of revenue, what is current capital. This is largely static part. This is not changing ever. But then we get into its applications. The applied part is when you look into the impact on the consumption and investment. Government is cutting indirect taxes and increasing direct taxes. So in total government revenue remains same, but how do that impact people? I'm asking a question here कि सरकार की टोटल कमाई उतनी ही है, गवर्नमेंट इज अर्निंग द सेम, बट पहले वो डायरेक्ट टैक्सेस से ज्यादा कमाती थी, इनडायरेक्ट टैक्सेस से कम कमाती थी. इट इज चेंजिंग दैट. इट इज लेट्स से reducing the indirect taxes further and increasing the direct taxes more. Then what is the impact on the people? Now this is applied part. Here you need to know the theory. Direct taxes are paid by people above a income. Only people who are earning have to pay direct taxes. And for those people also, not everyone has to pay, only those people who are earning above a certain threshold have to pay. So this is something we need to understand. So direct taxes are paid by, let's say, people with the ability to pay. Direct taxes वही लोग देते हैं जिनके पास पैसा दे पाने की क्षमता है. Okay, let's say people who have ability to pay the direct taxes. and vast majority do not pay direct taxes. Whereas indirect taxes are on consumption. Whenever we spend money, we have indirect taxes there. And that has to be paid by everyone. And that is why indirect taxes affect everyone in the economy, whether rich or poor, whether middle class or lower middle class. Everyone is affected by indirect taxes. So, over time, if indirect taxes reduce, that means burden on poor people reduce. And if direct taxes give us more income, then that means people in the top 5-10% of the society or top 10%, 20% of the earner are paying you taxes. So direct taxes are considered to be superior source of money for government. So this is your basic theory related to this topic. Okay. सरकार को पैसा चाहिए, okay, गवर्नमेंट को पैसा खर्च करना है सेना पे, सरकारी नौकरों पे, okay, I mean government employees पे. Government has to maintain infrastructure, government has to build roads, government has to run railways. So सरकार को तो सब कुछ चलाना है, उसके लिए पैसा चाहिए. लेकिन वही पैसा सरकार अगर किसी एक टैक्स से कमाए तो अलग इंपैक्ट होगा और किसी दूसरे टैक्स से कमाए तो अलग इंपैक्ट होगा. दिस इज योर बेसिक थियोरी. सो यू नीड टू नो ऑल दोस थियोरीज. देन if you know the basic theory, then you have to analyze. If GST is increasing and income tax is decreasing, what does it mean? It means that relatively on rich people, the tax could be decreasing, and poor people, the tax could be increasing. Then you have to see within GST on which products tax has increased. If the taxes are increased on air travel, if the taxes are increased on luxury car, then we cannot say on the poor people GST is increasing. So again, how does tax impact people is something which is part of your application, and you can only analyze that with careful studies. So while in the budgetary classification we have a static part, we also have a highly dynamic part and highly applied part. So this is more of your budget analysis. Budget analysis part is highly analytical. In fact, you can also divide it in two themes also. This static part as budgetary classification you can study separately, and budget analysis you can study separately, but I would say you should look at it in a single way. Similarly, how government spend its money also affect people. Government is giving more subsidies, have a different impact on people. Government spending that money on the infrastructure will have a very different impact on people. So how government spend money also affects people significantly. So this is something that you need to look into this theme. Now we will look into some previous year question also from this theme. Yes, I have picked up 3 questions from budget classification. What is the meaning of the term tax expenditure? Taking the housing sector as an example, discuss how it influences the budgetary policies of the government. This was asked in 2013. Okay, tax expenditure. So it is part of the budgetary concept, but this is not included in the budget, interestingly. Tax expenditure is basically that part of tax which government has given exception to. So government always from time to time introduce tax policies, introduce tax holidays, and introduce tax let's say incentives under which people can reduce their tax liability. So सरकार समय समय पे टैक्स में छूट देती है. That is basically tax expenditure. So that is part of your budgetary analysis. So for people who are taking home loan, for example, government gives certain tax incentives. So in that context, this question was asked in 2013. So how does this affect? This affect as in it will create more demand for housing. So even this is your applied question based on the budgetary classification. Tax expenditure is, by the way, is not in the budget, but it is still part of the budgetary classification. Okay. So This is one of your previous year question related to this budgetary classification. Then a straight question recently was asked about capital budget and revenue budget. Okay, and how the component of these budget. This is a direct static question on the budgetary classification. कि capital budget क्या होता है, revenue budget क्या होता है और दोनों का क्या importance है. So this is very much a straight question from the syllabus. Neither related to current affair, neither applied. सीधा सीधा question, सीधा syllabus से. No deep analysis, no contemporary theme. Nothing is there. Straight question from syllabus. Then there was another question in 2019, and there have been more questions. I have picked up 2-3, but there have been more questions. Public expenditure management is a challenge to the government of India in the context of budget making during post-liberalization period. Clarify it. So public expenditure management, how government spend its money in the budget, that has an impact on people and how it has changed over time. So government of India used to give a lot of people government job in past, before 1991 reforms. The number of government jobs reduced, the number of government companies reduced. Meanwhile, government increased its expenditure on subsidies, government increased its expenditure on infrastructure. So that changing nature of government expenditure, public expenditure, you have to analyze in detail. कि कैसे समय के साथ सरकार ने अपने खर्च को बदला है. For example, today if this question is asked, you have to talk about the most recent change in the last 6 years. That is, in the last 6 years, continuously the government capital expenditure has been increased. Government is spending more and more on infrastructure, public health facilities, and other areas. And meanwhile, we are reducing some of the traditional areas of expenditure. For example, our interest payments are reducing as a part of budget. So these are certain good things in recent time, but this was question in 2019. At that time, there were certain patterns. So you can look at this question कि कैसे टाइम के साथ सरकार का एक्सपेंडिचर चेंज हुआ है, गवर्नमेंट एक्सपेंडिचर चेंज हुआ है. सो दीज क्वेश्चन यू कैन वेरी इजीली आंसर just on the basis of analysis of the theme that we did now. अगर आप budgetary classification prepare करते हो, you have to prepare how over time, first of all, what are the sources of income, what are the areas of expenditure, then which areas of expenditure have which impact. अगर हम पैसा सब्सिडी दे तो क्या इम्पैक्ट होता है, अगर हम वो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पे खर्च कर दे तो क्या इम्पैक्ट होता है, और उसकी जगह अगर हम सबको सरकारी नौकरी पे रख ले तो क्या इम्पैक्ट होता है. सो यू नीड टू नो ऑल ऑफ दैट. When you are preparing the theme, you need to look into what are the sources of income, how each source affect people. If we try to collect more income from area A instead of B, how that affect people, how that affect economy, all of this you have to analyze now. फिर एग्जाम में कोई भी क्वेश्चन आए आप आंसर कर लेंगे. You will be able to answer any single question related to that theme. So you have to divide your budget into all its sources and areas. Then impact of each source, each area, how does this affect the economy, how does this affect the people. This is something that you are going to analyze there. I hope you are getting it. Okay, so that is your budgetary classification. Similarly, you also have to analyze certain dynamic concepts related to it. Okay, so over time, changing nature, changing pattern, the study of economic survey in this context becomes relevant. So this is analysis of one theme. Similarly, we are going to analyze more themes. Okay, so we will study these themes one by one. That was one sample that we did earlier. We are going to do them. So let's take just 2 minutes break and then we will resume this session. Just 2 minutes break for water. Okay, students, meanwhile you can send your messages. Displays the tab board is not fully visible. Okay. I have lowered down the tablet now. I hope this will help with the visibility issue. Okay, students. Just trying to check your messages here. Fine. So I just gave you example of one theme. I discussed the PYQ. We saw the last 2-year paper. So we have done most of the work. Now let us analyze these themes. Impact of the reforms. So we have to first start with 1991 reforms. You start with 1991 reforms. First of all, the need for reforms. कोई भी पॉलिसी हम जब पढ़ते हैं, when we study any policy, when we study any major reform, first of all, make it a point to understand why this reform was required. जब भी कोई change होता है, reform means some change in policy, some change in approach. So if we are talking about a reform, that means something has made it prompt, some change was required, need for reform. That is very important. For example, you talk about agricultural reforms. तो करने क्यों agriculture reforms? क्या agriculture में कोई problem है जिसके लिए reform करना है? Are we going to have a problem in agriculture? Do we have a problem in agriculture for which we are bringing reform? Do we have certain problem faced by our labor for which we have to bring reform? So any reform is brought for a reason. Any reform is brought to address a problem. So because reforms are there to address certain problems, सबसे पहला काम, need for reforms. Any reform topic, by the way, अगर आप ऐसे पढ़ेंगे तो आपको कभी प्रॉब्लम नहीं आएगा आंसर करने में. If you study like that, you will never face a problem. So nonetheless, need for reforms. So in 1990 we were facing the current account balance problem, we were facing BOP problem. I cannot teach the subject, of course. This is not a session for teaching, this is a session for analysis. So I'll be very quick with that. So first of all, you will look into need for reforms. Then you will look into major reforms. Okay. Why we required change? Then what change we brought? Major reforms. So mean क्या changes हुए? Then impact. What impact did those reforms had on various aspects related to growth, related to macroeconomic stability, for example, budget stability, for example, fiscal deficit, for example, balance of payment with the rest of the world, for example, employment, for example, poverty. इन सभी के ऊपर हम पढ़ेंगे impact क्या क्या है, क्या क्या change हुआ इन सब में. Okay, impact you have to study. Then gap areas. We brought reforms, but no policy can be perfect. There are always gaps. There are always possible changes. So there are always gap areas. You have to look into those gap areas. कि कुछ कमी रह गई. Some gap were there. Why those were there? How they can be fulfilled. Okay. So first you do this. Need for reforms. So although we called it impact of reforms, but even to understand impact properly, you need to look into need for reforms, major reforms, impact, gap areas. Okay. Then future direction. अगर जो गैप है उनको आज कवर अप करना हो तो क्या करना होगा? So the gap in 1995 could be different. Gap today can be very different. In 1995, we could have been talking about bringing the IT sector into India as the top priority. Today, that may not be the top priority. Today, job creation might be the top priority. So our priorities change as per the global conditions, as per the economic development of the world. So there are certain gap areas. That also something that we need to understand here, and that gap areas changing from time to time. So future direction will always be based on today's gap. जो प्रॉब्लम 95 में थी वो आज सॉल्व नहीं करनी है. Today we have to solve today's problem. In today's context, AI is becoming a big challenge. So how to address AI is a bigger concern today compared to past time. Are we clear? We were behind in technology, so that was a bigger problem in 1995 to secure public-private partnership agreement, to secure some foreign investments in the country. So that is also relevant here. So that is how you start, okay? In the impact of reforms area, that is how you start. But this is not how you complete. Now, these are various dimensions related to 1991 reforms. Then you also have to look into feasibility. You might have certain gap area, you might have certain desire for future. आपको ऐसा लग सकता है कि मैं ये चेंज करना चाहिए, बट क्या वो पॉसिबल है? Is it possible? It is feasible. And feasibility is also multiple aspect. Political, social, economic. Let me explain this aspect also. For example, we want to promote tourism in India. We can economically develop certain areas. We can economically develop infrastructure. हम connectivity improve कर सकते हैं. Okay? We can give better infrastructure in those areas. हम कुछ areas को promote कर सकते हैं. So economically we can promote tourism in India, but our problem is social. India's image is very poor. Our infrastructure might improve, but the culture also has to improve. When you want to invite rest of the world, when you are showcasing your tourism, people are not only going to come to India and click images of Taj Mahal. They are not only going to look at India Gate, they will also get into the nearby areas. So they might get into your Dharavis, they might get into your dirty slums. In Agra, after visiting Taj Mahal, they could be getting into dirty lanes of Agra. Frankly, I myself went to Agra some time ago with my family, and it is really, really backward. If you want to promote it as a tourist destination, it is still not fit for it. Taj corridor might be okay, Taj Mahal itself could be okay, but rest of the Agra city is not okay. That's not how you can promote tourism. You have to develop the culture simultaneously. So इसकी feasibility कम है, social feasibility कम है भी कुछ areas के. Certain areas have much higher feasibility. Culture is already very good. For example, there are many northeast states in India, okay, which have much better record when it comes to discipline, when it comes to let's say cleanliness, public hygiene. So many of the northeast states, for example, Sikkim is far better compared to West Bengal, which is next to it. Darjeeling and Sikkim are just next to each other, but there is a hell lot of a difference between the two areas, and that is because of the culture, local culture. So social feasibility is a different thing. Okay, you want to develop an industry in India which people do not like, then there will always be trouble. And by the way, whenever tourism will develop too much, there will always be certain dark sides to it. There might be some prostitution related to it. there might be some drug abuse related to it. Is society going to accept that or not? Is society going to ignore that or not? So all the big tourist destinations, whether it is Thailand, whether it is Miami in Los Angeles, or let's say there are certain areas of Brazil, or there are certain areas, of course, in Europe, such as Paris, such as Monaco, such as Rome, etc., or Florence or Venice. These are some of the top destinations, Hong Kong. All these areas, you like or you do not like, all of them suffer from crime. All of them suffer from, let's say, prostitution, and they suffer from drug abuse, etc. So, is society ready for that? Are those cities clean? Are those cities ready to showcase? I'm just taking example tourism and trying to explain the feasibility. This is what we are going to do with every policy. जब भी कोई policy के suggestion की बात करें, whenever you are going to talk about a policy as a suggestion, you have to think about its feasibility also. Sometimes there can be social feasibility. I'm not saying culturally we are backward. I'm just giving an example that in tourism, today there is a backlash coming to India as foreign backpackers are discovering India in both aspects of it. There is a lot of praise also for India, but there is also a lot of backlash to India's dirtiness. Then is there political feasibility? For example, we brought agricultural changes. We brought agricultural reforms in 2020 related to markets, but these were opposed by certain farmer groups. So these were also economic reforms against which the political consensus, the social consensus is not yet ready. Okay, so feasibility is also very important related to reforms. Today we want to promote certain sector. Do we have social acceptability? Do we have money for it? Sometimes it can be about economic feasibility. There are certain people who would like that India is the top leading technology country in the world. But do we have money for R&D? We are not technology leader in the world, by the way. We might be heading, some of the Indians might be heading some of the top technology companies in the world. And some of the Indian companies might be doing good in technology, but that doesn't mean India is good in technology. We are good in technology adoption, but we are nowhere in pioneering technology. We are nowhere in research. हमारे यहाँ नई technology नहीं बनती है. Existing technology पे हम अच्छा काम करते हैं. We do good work. Of course, there can be some new technology. मैं ऐसा नहीं कह रहा हूँ. I'm not saying that there is absolutely no invention, no innovation in India. But that aspect is very less because for that economic feasibility is not there. Economic feasibility is not there. So there can be various things. आप रिफॉर्म की बात करते हैं, हमें अच्छा लगता है कि हमारे पास 6th जनरेशन फाइटर जेट भी होना चाहिए, हमारे पास टूरिज्म में भी हम टॉप होने चाहिए, हमारे पास ये भी अच्छा होना चाहिए, वो भी अच्छा होना चाहिए. बट क्या उसके लिए feasibility है? Do we have feasibility? Okay, we might have endless wish list, but do we have feasibility? And there are multiple aspects in feasibility. Fortunately, इस section में we will be mostly talking about economic feasibility, but other things also. If you want to truly understand the subject, you need to look into these as well. So, when you are studying reforms, you have to look into the need first of all. Why a change is required? Then once that change is brought, how does it impact people? Then what are the gap areas? Then what are the future directions? When you study impact also you have to study on various phenomena. Macroeconomic impact, growth impact or impact on growth, okay? Welfare impact, for example, impact on inflation, poverty, unemployment, okay? Impact on rural areas, urban areas, all these perspectives we have to cover. So this is how you are going to prepare impact of economic reforms. Then you can bring any reform. You bring GST, do this for GST. Why there was need for GST? What is the impact of GST? What are the gap areas in GST? What are the future directions in GST? Any reform you can use this parameter. Then what is the feasibility? हम कहते हैं GST में, for example, that all the products are not in GST. For example, petroleum is outside GST. For example, let's say alcohol is outside GST, but that is politically not feasible. States need some freedom. When GST is introduced, states lost their tax freedom because all the tax rates are decided by GST Council. If one state wants to change certain tax rate, अगर किसी स्टेट को कोई चेंज करना है टैक्स में तो वो नहीं कर सकती. Today they can make those changes in at least petrol, alcohol prices. Otherwise, they could not even change these prices if these are part of GST. So there are both aspects here. Okay, so feasibility is very important. We might have a gap in GST, but the feasibility you have to study. Okay, so that perspective is going to be there for reforms. By the way, we have a topic of tax reforms. So tax reform is a little more specific aspect of it. Here we are going to talk about recent tax changes. So for example, we brought certain changes in our income tax system. We have brought a new income tax payment system, and under which we have simplified the tax system. So tax payment system A and B, okay, new tax payment system or the old system. We generally call it regime, the old tax regime and the new tax regime. Similarly, in the corporation tax also we have brought changes. We have reduced the tax rate and we've also brought other changes. Then GST itself is a big change. In addition, we have brought the wealth tax in India, sorry, my bad, the capital gain tax in India in place of wealth tax. So these are some of the major changes in the last 5-6 years. Okay, reduction in corporation tax, change in the corporation tax system, changes in the income tax system, introduction of GST and changes since then changes in the capital gains tax. These are the major changes in the tax. So why each of them was required? What is the impact? What are the gap areas? What are future directions? Then what are the feasibility issues? अभी इनमें जो gap है वो gap क्यों है? For example, in GST, I was just talking about why petroleum and your alcohol is outside GST framework. Why states still have certain complaints? So these things you need to look into. Then only you can cover this topic in detail. Okay. By the way, I can bring labor reforms. There is a topic of land reforms also. All the reforms you have to approach in similar manner. Clear? Okay, all of you, there are quite a lot of students who are online. I am checking out. If you have any question, please ask. Okay, I'm checking out the chat regularly. So one of the students was telling me that, sir, because of the tablet, I cannot see the board. So I've flattened my tablet also. No issue, but I would like to see more questions directly from the topic that I'm discussing. पूछिए आप लोग questions, okay? We still have 10 minutes in this discussion, let's say 10-15 minutes. Meanwhile, I will cover the remaining topics. Now, let me erase this. Okay, so this we have done, land reforms we have done. Now, what are the others? GDP measurement. Why we measure? First of all, नापते क्यों है GDP? Why we measure GDP? What purpose do we want to solve by measuring GDP? Okay, because we want to target growth. And growth you can calculate only when you know the current GDP and the last year GDP. Then only you can compare कि इस साल कितना बढ़े, this year how much growth we had. Why we measure GDP? Okay, then GDP measurement methods. So there is income method, there is expenditure method, there is value added method, and each of them have their own advantages, disadvantages. Then once you know the GDP measurement methodology, then you have to look into the GDP measurements or income measurements. So GDP at factor cost, GDP at the market price, then you have GNP, you have NNP, and likewise there are multiple measures. Why do we need multiple of them? How each of them is different from other? Although this is not much relevant for your mains, ये बहुत relevant नहीं है. Why we measure GDP is still relevant, but this is not. This is more relevant for your microeconomics. But nonetheless, I've covered it. आपको ये mains के लिए तो नहीं पढ़ना है, okay? Methodology is also something they're not going to ask directly, but still can be useful in other aspects. Then gaps in GDP. We calculate GDP so that we know how much is available for the people in the country. Okay? How much is available for the people in this country. So in a way, what people are going to get, what people are going to consume is measured by GDP. And that is what is going to determine their economic well-being. So in a way, we are trying to measure well-being of people, or we are trying to measure the production level in the country. These two things we are trying to measure: production level and the well-being. Now, what are the gaps? That there might be a production in the country which is not measured, which is not considered. So that is a gap. So for example, informal economy. Then there can be production of services which is not counted in GDP because we are doing it for free, for the people we know, for the people we love. So there we have care economy. This is also not measured in GDP. This is also a gap, and we have seen question on that. In fact, we have seen question on informal economy also. So within this theme, you also have these: care economy, informal economy. Okay. So likewise, there can be more gaps. So you have to study it like that. Why we measure GDP? What is GDP measurement method? Okay. What is the GDP different measures, although that is PT topic, then gaps in GDP measurement, then alternatives. What are the alternatives? What are the new concepts? So for example, there was a topic of potential GDP on which a question was asked that we can calculate potential GDP, that okay, we are producing this much, but we can perhaps produce more, we can produce that much. Hamara potential kitna hai? How much we can produce at maximum? That is potential GDP. So they asked a question on this as well. What are the alternatives to your regular GDP measurement? So there we have concept called potential GDP. Then among other alternatives, we are trying to identify the well-being. You also have Human Development Index, you have other measurement indexes which try to measure the well-being of people. So GDP can give you some idea about the development level of the country, the people. Per capita GDP can give you the development level of people, but those are not perfect measurement. You also have to look into HDI, Human Development Index. Okay. And there are multiple measures like that. Sometimes people talk about happiness index, although that is not properly measured, that cannot be properly, there is no parameter which can be measured. Happiness is not such parameter which can be measured. Nonetheless, this is what is there in the GDP measurement. Okay. So these are the various aspects of this theme. That is how you expand a theme. Now everything will fit into. कोई भी question आएगा तो इसी के अंदर आएगा. Any question, whether it has come in past or whether it will come in future, it will be there within these. Clear? So let's move ahead. this is done, this is done. Pattern of economic growth is our next topic. So if we want to study the pattern of economic growth, you have to look into the growth trend. Okay. First of all, you look at the growth trend. How do you analyze the growth trend? For example, between 1991 to 2000, average growth rate of India was 6.5%. Then between 2000 to 2010, average growth rate of India was 7.5%. Okay, or 7.4%, let's say. Then from 2010 to 2020, average growth rate of India was, let's say, 6%. Then 2021 to 2025, the average growth rate has been around 7%. So this is how the trend is there. Okay, general idea we can identify. The maximum growth rate that we achieved was close to 8%, and that was between 2002 to 2008. In this period, we had 8% growth. Okay, and then in between 2019, 20, 21, these were 3 years of bad growth. That was the COVID period, and also 19 was bad year for us in general. So economic growth slowed down in 19. So this is your trend. I'm just giving you example. Similar trend you need to identify. For example, you are looking at trend of employment. You need to look into the labor force participation. You need to look at the unemployment rate. Every decade, what is the rate? Okay, so this is just an idea. You can look into every 5 year, you can look into 10 year. You should have general idea of this trend. At least 20-25 साल का trend पता होना चाहिए. We are not asking beyond that, but at least last 20-25 trend for the major parameter should be known. Okay, so this is your economic growth trend. Then there are pattern in between. For example, between 2008 to 2012, low growth. Okay, then again 2019 to 2021, low growth. So now between the trend you need to know what are the gap, what breaks this trend. Generally in this trend we can see continuous growth, but there have been bad patches. What are those bad patches? 2008 to almost 2013, that was 5-year bad patch after the global economic recession. So during this period, Indian economic growth remained very low, around 5.5%. Then 2019 to 2021, in this period, India's economic growth again remained very low, close to, let's say, 3.5%. Okay, and since 2022 to 2025, in fact, the growth has been 7.5%. Okay, since I have written from 21 to 25, I have also included a bad year. I have kept this growth relatively low here. But in general, this is what you need to know: the general trend, then the exception in the trend. So question can be about general trend. Okay, or question can be on those exceptions. So this is something you need to be very clear with. Then, of course, reasons for these exceptions. Then future trend. Okay, these are always expected future trend. So for example, GDP growth estimate for India by IMF, that is your estimated future trend. RBI report also talk about estimated future trend. Okay, you also need to know various causes. For example, Russia-Ukraine war affects our growth. For example, international instability affects our growth. All those factors also you need to keep in mind. अगर हमारी ग्रोथ बीच में कम हो रही है या ग्रोथ उतनी नहीं हो रही जितनी हो सकती है, देन causes also you need to look into. Then reforms required. If we want high growth, what reforms do we need to bring? Any topic which is related to trend, whether it is unemployment, whether it is inflation, whether it is GDP, whether it is per capita income, whether it is industrial growth, you have to look into it. What is the general growth trend? What are exceptions in that? What are the reasons for those exceptions? क्या गड़बड़ हुई उस time में? Then future, what are we expecting? Of course, you need to know the current growth trend. And if we want good growth in future, अगर जो expected trend हमें पूरा करना है, if we want the growth close to the expected trend, what reforms do we need to bring? Okay, so this is your analysis of pattern of economic growth. Okay, then similarly you can do this topic of growth diversification, crop diversification. Sorry, so why we need to diversify crops? What is our current crop pattern? Okay, let's do that also quickly. Okay, so we are on crop diversification. So first of all, crop pattern. Which crops we grow? What are the top crops? Which crops we grow in which area? Okay, so for example, at present dominated by rice, wheat, etc. Need for diversification. क्यों diversify करना है? So what are the issues? If we are growing wheat and rice predominantly, what are the problems there? Then what are alternatives? If we want to diversify, then where we will go from rice and wheat? What to grow? For example, in last few years, what is in focus? Dairy farming, poultry, millets. Government has promoted these. Then the pulses. Okay. Pulses also are a promoted area. Then horticulture, fruits and vegetables, government is promoting. So these are areas where we need to diversify. Dairy farming, even though India has record growth, but still our milk production is less than what we require. Okay, our country has more consumption of ghee, paneer, and number of other products. Similarly, poultry. Poultry also has more growth potential. Of course, dairy has much more, but still. Then millets, they are promoted as a health product. Then pulses, horticulture, fruits and vegetables also we need to produce more. So this is where we need to diversify, what we need to do. Okay. Issues. We know we need to do this, but why we are not able to do that? Issues for underachievement. So, for example, here the problem is government gives price support for wheat and rice, which is absent for many of them. So, this is a problem, policy issue. For example, in this case, policy is a big problem. And if government wants to change policy, then there is political opposition to it. The wheat and rice growing farmers in Punjab and Haryana, they are in opposition to these changes. So, likewise, there are various other aspects. Then what are the environmental dimension, economic dimension? Some of these crops are here because of economic dimension. There is more income in horticulture, there is more income in dairy farming, poultry. But then millets are and pulses are environment friendly, relatively. They are more suitable for certain areas. Oil seeds also you can add to this list. So you need to look into why we are not able to. हमें पता है कि हमें क्या करना है. We need to grow this, but why we are not able to? Because farmers still grow wheat and rice. Why they grow wheat and rice? Because there is MSP support. Why government can't change MSP support? Because the farmers who are growing wheat and rice are politically powerful and they protest for any change. So that is a challenge here. Are we clear? So then Alternatives क्या कर सकते हैं? So you give more incentives on these crops, you promote these crops. If farmers will have opportunity of more income, they will still grow it. So crop diversification is very, I would say, interdisciplinary topic. You need to bring in environment. You need to bring in a lot of science. You need to bring in some geography here. You need to bring in social aspect. You need to bring in political aspect. This topic really require your understanding on all these aspects, because wheat and rice are not just geographical issue, or they are not just environmental issue. There is a political issue also related to the MSP support that is given there. So likewise, you have to look at this topic in this way. If you approach like that, any question on crop diversification, you will not have any trouble answering it. Okay. Next is inclusive growth. Okay. So, first of all, the meaning. You need to understand what is inclusive growth, how it is different from growth. Okay. Growth versus inclusive growth. Then its dimensions you have to prepare. So, some people are not getting benefits of crop, benefits of growth. Who are these people? Who are these people? So these can be gender specific. Women may not get the benefit. Okay. These can be age specific. Old people may not get the benefit. But more important in Indian context today is region specific. Regional inequality is a very big problem in India. Region specific. Okay, rural, urban issue. That urban areas get benefit of growth. Rural areas are not inclusive, are not getting the benefits. Then it can be religion specific. People of certain religion are remaining behind in economic growth process. And then there can be class issue. People who are already better off are getting major benefits. So there can be a lot of these aspects. So you need to understand all the dimension. Particularly this regional issue in India is very big. Eastern India has remained much more backward compared to the rest of India. That is one of our top concerns. Then Indian villages have also remained relatively backward. So these are very big concerns here. There can be many more dimensions. So you need to first of all look into the various dimensions of inclusiveness. That who are those who did not get the benefits of growth. Then what we can do for them. Policy alternatives. Okay, what government is doing for them? Government is bringing a lot of policies to support rural areas. Okay, for example, Kisan Samman Nidhi or all the schemes for agricultural support, etc. Then infrastructure in rural areas, and there are a number of other things. So, what are the policy alternatives in order to achieve inclusive growth? Then, inclusive growth impact. If we achieve inclusive growth, how does it affect the sustainability? How does inclusive growth promote sustainability? How does it promote long-term development? Sustainable development, let's say. Then how does inclusive growth promote gender empowerment or women empowerment? How does this affect the urban slums? If we have inclusive growth, rural areas also get benefit, then there will not be that much migration to urban areas. And the slums that are created are a big problem. And this is because of lack of inclusive growth. People will not be forced for migration. Migration will not be because of push factor. It will be because of pull factor. Pull factor, when cities create opportunity and they attract people, that is a pull factor. What is a push factor? Your village has no opportunity for you. It is pushing you out. आपके गांव में आपके लिए कुछ नहीं है, वो गांव आपको कह रहा है कि बाहर जाओ. Basically, there is nothing for you in village, so you are forced to move out. We need migration, but because of pull factor, not because of push factor. So if that is there, then urban slums will disappear, and likewise. So this topic, inclusive growth, you have to interstudy inclusive growth with various other phenomena. क्या सस्टेनेबिलिटी इससे रिलेटेड है, क्या जेंडर एम्पावरमेंट, विमेन एम्पावरमेंट इससे रिलेटेड है, इज इट रिलेटेड टू अर्बनाइजेशन, इज इट रिलेटेड टू स्लम्स, इज इट रिलेटेड टू. सो इस तरह से जब आप डायमेंशन सेट करेंगे दिमाग में, then you can attempt any question on the inclusive growth. Okay, now we've looked at enough of these approaches. Let us look at some of the questions. So if we look at the PYQ on themes, then impact of reforms. This is something you can see. State the comprehensive structural reforms undertaken to improve Indian economy since 1991. This is a straight question, and this is a relatively old question in 2004, where they asked you directly what reforms we have brought. So you had to very clearly talk about L, P and G, liberalization, privatization and the globalization. Okay. Similarly, you have next question, has the Indian governmental system responded adequately to the demands of L, P and G that started in 1991? What can the government do to be responsive to this important change? So this is purely static question, which of course you can answer on the basis of analysis which we did. Then this is where we have to see how the things have changed over time. What was required in 1991? Is it required today? The thing that I was explaining earlier. 1991 में जो changes चाहिए थे, क्या वो आज भी चाहिए? The world has changed a lot since 1991. So today, are we able to keep up with the requirements of the reforms? So this is the nature of this question. Again, this particular aspect I covered there. I was talking about it, that you not only have to look at an old topic in old time, कि हमने एक टाइम पे इंडस्ट्रियल रिफॉर्म्स किए थे, इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन किया था, तो क्या आज इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन करना है तो हम उसी तरीके से करेंगे? नहीं, आज वो बिल्कुल अलग तरीके से होगा. So our approach to it will be very different today. So any old topic, if it is asked today, you also have to look at it from today's parameter. Clear? Then liberalization of the Indian economy since 1991 has led to excessive consumerism. This is where they ask something related to the impact of the reforms, that more and more people are basically consuming what they want. So basically this is market-based system. You have to explain that if you want to control consumption of people, that will be a socialist system. Overconsumption of what? That people are buying fancy cars, that people in poor country like India should not buy fancy cars. People should not aspire. लोगों के पास अच्छे अच्छे बड़े घर नहीं होने चाहिए क्योंकि भारत तो गरीब देश है. भारत को साइंटिफिक डेवलपमेंट नहीं करना चाहिए क्योंकि भारत तो गरीब देश है. भारत में लोगों को महंगी गाड़ियां नहीं खरीदनी चाहिए क्योंकि भारत तो गरीब देश है. नो, दैट्स नॉट करेक्ट. ऐसा पुराने समय की जो हमारी सोशलिस्टिक थिंकिंग है उसमें हो सकता है. That's not how we have to think. So you have to actually argue against it, that excessive consumerism is a feature of market economy. People buy what they want, what they need. Yes, we can discourage it a bit. We can promote savings. Of course, you have to talk about that. Yes, if people are saving very less, if people are spending excessively through credit card, they're getting into debt in order to buy this. If they are buying iPhones but they cannot afford them, then that is a problem. We need to create awareness for that. But otherwise, this is what market economy is. Okay, overproduction of white goods. Okay, so you can link it to iPhone today. This question in 2001, but you can make it modern for yourself. अगर आप PYQ को आज analyze कर रहे हो, you can analyze for today. People buying expensive things on EMI, things which they cannot afford. तो of course EMI पे iPhone खरीदना गलत है. बट अगर आपने प्रोस्पेरिटी अचीव की है, इफ यू हैव अर्नड इनफ, आपने मेहनत की है, पैसा कमाया, तो उस पैसे को खर्च करना कोई गलत नहीं है. लेकिन बिना कमाए आप उधार लेकर ईएमआई पर अगर खर्च करते हैं, दैट इज रॉन्ग. सो कंज्यूमरिज्म इज समथिंग व्हिच मस्ट बी checked as per your ability to spend. Okay, so likewise, impact of reforms, there can be from various aspects they can be asking question. Similarly, GDP measurement, define potential GDP. I was talking about it earlier, and explain its determinants. So this is a new way of measuring. Potential GDP is something which you produce when you have zero unemployment. When every resource is utilized in the economy, then you get potential. And what are the factors that have been inhibiting India from realizing potential GDP? This was a recent question in 2020. So you have to talk about that unemployment and tax, lack of tax reforms, lack of labor reforms. You have to talk about number of things, problems with MSME, micro, small and medium enterprises in India. So those were required in this question. Okay. So of course, it goes beyond GDP measurement. It talks about the issues in Indian economy as well. But GDP measurement is also a very important aspect. Okay. Then explain the difference computing methodology for India's GDP before the year 2015 and after 2015. So in 2015, we changed the GDP calculation methodology. Earlier, we used to have GDP at FC. Now we had GDP at MP. So likewise, we changed it. Okay. So as you can see, these previous year question, if you prepare them thematically and if you look at the various dimensions that we discussed, कि कोई भी टॉपिक है उसको क्यों पढ़ रहे हैं, what is the background of it, what is its context in today's economy, what are the data related trends, what are example, what are impact on other aspects. If you look into all of that, then you are not going to face problem in answering any question that comes related to it. So आपको उसका static भी देखना है, you have to look at its static portion, you have to look at its dynamic portion from today's perspective कि आज की economy की requirement क्या है, today what are the challenges that we are facing related to that issue, okay, what are the gap areas, what mistakes we have made, how those can be covered today, okay, what are our achievements. You have to look into all those dimensions. Then you have to look at the feasibility of the changes we want to make. So that's how you are going to prepare thematically. So what we have done today is theme analysis, and we covered hardly 5-6 themes, okay, in the last 2 hours. So if you want to study the entire subject, there would be about 80 themes. And if you want to know further about themes, how to divide proper economy into more themes and how to study this further, you can contact us. We also have certain programs this year, and every year, in fact, we used to have program. So where you can also get benefit, you can do it yourself also. Okay. But if you want guidance from teacher, where you already get the thematic division of the subject, where you are getting the idea of the subject in a proper way, and we are doing analysis of the PYQ properly with every topic, and we are covering entire syllabus thematically, then you can contact us. Okay. You can easily contact us through our helpline number. You can also be connected directly to the faculty also. So that's not very difficult. In fact, at GS Core, one of our biggest USP, unique selling point, is that any student can directly talk to faculty. Faculty is not unapproachable. Faculty is not behind big walls. Faculty is right there in front of you. आपके लिए हैं और आपके साथ हैं, आपके पास हैं. हम लोग बहुत easily approachable है. आप में से जो हमसे बात करना चाहता है कर सकता है. So we have program and you can also benefit from it. So if you need support, you can approach. Otherwise, you can do it yourself also. We have given you a complete idea. मैंने आपको पूरा blueprint दे दिया है कैसे खुद पढ़ना है. Okay? But if you want support, you can approach us. For example, this year we have, and let's say GS Mains Advance. Okay? We also have a quick revision course. Okay? And likewise, we have other multiple programs as well for different optional subject also, and for each subject there will be more sessions like this in which for different subjects they are going to analyze, they are going to teach you how different themes can be approached under each subject. Okay, so that's how you are going to look at it. And particularly from this approach, if you want to look into, we have a mains crash course coming very soon. So basically students can self-study. We are not saying coaching is essential for everyone or teacher support is essential, but teacher support can always be good provided you have a need for it. It can of course reduce your efforts. It can help you to prioritize your time. हमने already वो बहुत मेहनत की है पहले से और काफी सालों से, तो उसका बेनिफिट आपको मिलता है. ऐसा नहीं कि आपको मेहनत नहीं कर सकते, ऐसा नहीं है कि सब्जेक्ट को आप थीम में नहीं डिवाइड कर सकते, that you cannot divide the subject into themes, that you cannot do it yourself. You can do everything yourself, but it will take much more time. Okay, this is where perhaps our role becomes much more important. Nonetheless, of course, it's up to you. We are anyways providing a blueprint for every subject one by one. Thank you. I hope this session has helped you, and we'll be meeting you, different teachers for different subjects. Thank you.